Hello, everybody. I'm Sherry Winston, and you are at Ask the Sex Teacher Anything About Female Anatomy. Although, if you want to ask about male erotic anatomy, that's okay too. That's tonight's class. It's a free webinar, and we're happy to be giving this away and inviting you all to ask questions. So, starting off, let me just get you oriented here. The way you're going to ask questions is you're going to write your questions in that chat box there at the bottom and let me know what you want to know. Anything goes. I'd like to stick to anatomy, but we can go where we go. So we also have some questions that people sent in before we even got started. So I'm going to start with one of those while I wait for the rest of you to type in all of your questions about anatomy, especially erotic anatomy. So we're going to start with a question that somebody sent in already previously. And Marnie asks, how can we release body self-consciousness, judgments of our yoni's scent? Yoni is the sacred Sanskrit word for vulva, vagina, all those yummy female parts. Judgments of our yoni's scent, secretions, programmed feelings of embarrassment, as well as body judgments in general, like feeling my stomach is fat. Well, that's a really awesome starter question because it's really about the holistic sexuality approach, which is about the mind, body, heart, spirit interaction, because this isn't just about bodies and body parts, but it's how we feel about them, how we think about them, and all of that plays out in our sexual experiences and how much pleasure that we allow ourselves. So the first step, I think, in this process is to acknowledge the messages that are going on. What's playing in your head? What are the messages that you've got? And then we can start to reprogram those messages. So if, for example, you've got a message that comes up that your yoni isn't delicious or doesn't smell wonderful, that would be a message that you could reprogram. And the way you reprogram that is by every time you notice that negative thought coming up, you just substitute a positive thought, and you say that 3 times at a minimum. So if the thought crosses your mind, my yoni's just not that yummy smelling and tasting, then you notice, oh, there's that negative thought again. That's not true. My yoni is delicious. She smells wonderful. In fact, we're evolutionarily programmed for our genitals to be delicious and sexy and attractive. So that could be part of the thought. It's like, of course she's delicious and attractive. And we gradually reprogram. Now, you can also ask partners to help you do that. So when you're with a partner, you could say to your partner, one of the things that comes up for me is I have these negative feelings about my yoni. And your partner will probably say, oh, but I love your yoni. It's so yummy. It's delicious. It smells great. I love being there. I love playing with it. I love being inside it. And those are all great things to hear. So you can say to your partner, tell me those things. When we're being sexual, when we're being sensual, when we're being playful, tell me about how lovely, yummy, and delicious it is. And you can set up, here's where we could bring in spirit, you can set up little ritual experiences in your solo play and your partner play that are dedicated to reprogramming that. So, for example, maybe you want to create like a little altar. So you want to maybe have some flowers and maybe a seashell. Perhaps you want to go into a meditative artistic trance and draw a picture of your yoni. Maybe you have a candle that you light. All the things that represent beauty. Flowers are the sex organs of plants, right? So create a little altar and then go to your altar, light your candle, and then have a solo sex session that you dedicate to just loving your yoni. This works for your belly and any other body parts you don't like to, by the way. Just have a session where as you go through your arousal trance, you keep sending loving messages. You might want to put a hand on your heart and another hand on your yoni and just breathe and open, connect to the pleasure. So there's a whole bunch of different ideas I sort of threw in there about ways you can reprogram that message by yourself or with the help of your partners. And I think it's one of the projects that we all can benefit from. So there you go. So there's some ideas of how you can get going on that project. All right, what else? Anita asks, I'm interested in more of the physiology of postmenopausal women, not necessarily the anatomy. Sex is so painful even with good lubricants. Well, thanks for bringing that up, Anita. The fact of the matter is menopause makes some dramatic changes, and rather than kind of denying or ignoring them, it's how do we learn to use them? How can we learn to use it in a positive? So a couple of things that I want to suggest. First of all, are you getting to full, deep arousal? For most women, that takes 30 to 45 minutes to get to that level of arousal, stimulating our minds, stimulating the non-sexual parts of our body, stimulating the more secondary erogenous zones, then really getting the external part of the genitals aroused. Maybe we'll wind up talking about this tonight, I'm sure, but women have a whole network of structures made of erectile tissue. And a lot of those are accessible externally. And so make sure all of the parts you can access externally are really engorged, really aroused before you do any entering of the vagina. And then play with the parts that are closer to the entrance. And then when you've got a full-on erection, that's what I call it, when all the erectile network is engorged, and you're at high-level arousal, it's much more likely to feel awesome when something is inside. And then the last bit, well, two more bits. I did a written blog about lube that you might want to read. So you can go to our website, intimateartcenter.com, and look for the Lube Rules blog. Read about that, because it might be that there are better lubes that you could be using. But the other thing is you want to get the lube up inside the vagina. And so slathering it around on the outer parts is great, but it's not necessarily going to get you that deep extra lubrication that you might want postmenopausally. So you can use an inserter. That's like a syringe with no needle. You can use the kind of applicator you'd use with a vaginal medication. You can use any of those to insert lube way up high in the vagina. You can make coconut oil suppositories. By the way, coconut oil doesn't mix with latex, so don't use those if you're using latex barriers. But if you're not, make coconut oil suppositories. You just make them cold. There's a whole recipe somewhere on the blog, I think. And insert a kind of like a finger, make like a finger of coconut oil in an ice cube tray or something. Keep it cold. Right before you're playing, put one way up high inside and it will melt and melt down. And then maybe insert another one just before you get to that part where you want to have some penetration. And so I think all of those things can really help you still have lots of pleasurable penetration even postmenopausally. Thanks for that great question. Okay. Here's another one, and remember, just keep them coming. Jordan says, I personally have been struggling with the ability to orgasm. It feels great, but I just can't find what puts me over the edge. Any advice or ideas on how to explore my sexual anatomy would be very much appreciated. Well, Jordan, you're so not alone. Orgasm can be a challenge for lots of women. There's a lot of women who have not yet found their path to orgasm. There are other women who sometimes have orgasms, but not reliably or proficiently. So a couple things I want to say. Orgasm, especially for women, is a learned experience. So there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. It's really important to not feel bad about yourself. You're just in the learning journey. It's just stuff you haven't learned yet. It would be like if you don't know how to play the piano, you wouldn't feel bad or ashamed. You would just know, oh, there's some stuff I haven't learned yet. And if I want to learn, I can. I'll hit a few points here, but I just want to note, by the way, that I'm right now in the middle of an online class about female pleasure, which people can still join if they're interested, because you can get the recordings of the first couple of sessions. So it's a whole class talking about how female pleasure operates and how we can have more pleasure. And next month we're doing a class that is specifically about anatomy, so there'll be lots of images. So I'm going to talk about that a lot in those classes, but I want to give you just something for now. So what I was talking about to the last question, which is make sure that you're really totally thoroughly turned on. A lot of us don't get as turned on as we could be, as we have the potential to be, because we sort of have this model that we should get turned on really fast, and so we're sort of settling for arousal that isn't as big and deep as it could be. Take your time. Turn on your whole body. It's not just about the genitals. Touch the rest of your body. Awaken that. Turn that on. You might want to do things, movements particularly can be useful. Perhaps you want to put on your favorite dance music and dance for 5 or 10 minutes and really get your blood flowing and your energy up before you even start solo sex. Then, and solo sex really is your learning laboratory. This is really where most of us will learn to find a reliable path to orgasm. And then, again, this isn't so much about your genitals, it's about your whole mind, body, but play with things like enhancing your breathing, exploring sound, playing with your pelvic floor muscles, those kinds of things. Those will all enhance arousal, make it more likely for you to find your path to orgasm. And then when you do get to the genitals, I really want you to explore all of the parts you have. And if you haven't taken one of the classes where we talk about anatomy, you might want to look at one of my books, because the parts that we have are not out there in the world. They're not in the images that you're going to see in other sexuality books or textbooks. So if we don't know what's there, we don't know how to play with it. But so you've got this erectile network. You've got 3 parts of the clitoris. You've got these 2 big vestibular bulbs on either side under the labia. You've got erectile tissue under the floor of the vagina, and you've got erectile tissue surrounding the urethra. So it's very helpful to have that map, which I can't give you tonight. I wish I could, but you're going to have to probably come to the class or get the book to see the map. But if you see the map, for me, that was really useful in exploring where each of those structures is located and then finding the ways to get them really engorged. So don't necessarily start with the head of the clitoris. Start with the vestibular bulbs under the labia and rubbing the labia and underneath them and stroking the whole vulva. Play with them, get them really big and engorged. Then you might want to play with the shaft of the clitoris. That's the structure just above the head of the clitoris. Get all of that really good and juicy and engorged. Then have some clitoral stimulation and see where that gets you. And so again, this is about exploring what turns you on and finding your path. And remember what I said about the breath and the sound and the movement, because those are real big keys to learning how to orchestrate your arousal and get to your orgasm more easily. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. All right. Lucy says, according to doctor, I have something called vaginismus, and she's defining it as tight pelvic muscles, but we're going to go back to that in a minute, which is caused by a few things: trauma, emotional abuse, distrust for the partner, all in my case. After reading your wonderful book, thanks, I've learned to take care of myself with a vibrator or 2. The problem is, let's see the rest of your question. Hold on, I gotta go to another menu so I can see the rest of your question. Oh, I've lost your question. Oh, there we are. Okay. Problem is, I only actually have half. Problem is, I can reach. Okay, Lucy, you got cut off. I'll start with Anne talking about the first part, but Lucy, if you can give me the rest of your question, that would be great. Okay, so first of all, vaginismus is more than just tight pelvic muscles. That's part of it, that the muscles have a abnormally high level of tension, but it's also that they go into a painful spasm under certain circumstances. So again, the first thing I want you to think about is playing in ways that don't involve penetration and really getting skilled at getting your whole erectile network really engorged and playing with all the parts that you can access from the outside. And that increased blood flow and arousal and having orgasms that way is going to help heal those tight pelvic floor muscles and the ones that are spasming. The other thing that I think is really useful for women with that kind of an issue is physical therapists who are trained in pelvic floor techniques. And these are easier to find than they used to be. But if you can find a physical therapist, they can actually get in there and work on the spots, these spots, kind of nodules or trigger points, can develop in these muscles, and they can really work on releasing those. You can also do some work yourself. Again, I would do this if you're doing it yourself in high-level arousal, and then start just with a finger and very, very gently, under your own terms, under your own power, start to put just the tip of a finger in, and then when you're at the point where you can have one or two fingers inside comfortably, start playing with things where you not only where you kind of squeeze the fingers, but where you see if you can release. And the other move that you can practice is pushing out and down. The same way when we poop, when we have a bowel movement, we push out and down. You can do that with the vaginal muscles also. And so those are all things that are going to help heal that condition. The other thing to keep in mind is make sure that there's no other associated underlying condition like a low-level chronic vaginal infection that can cause inflammation and irritation of the nerves. So those are all some things that you can work on to heal that. Okay. Here's the rest of Lucy's question. Okay. I can reach a certain point and no further. Even with encouragement, it can be frustrating at times. Seems a block still exists and prevents me from feeling fully expressed. It's very close, but not yet. What can you suggest? So, Lucy, the things I will add to what I already said are really a lot of this healing is going to go on in your relationship with yourself, in your self-pleasuring. So the more you create a healing, self-loving, self-pleasuring environment, the better you're going to feel, and you're going to be able to bring those skills into your partner play. But I think that the healing really is going to, a lot of it's going to happen by yourself. So I really want you to schedule self-love sessions. I want you to take your time. I want you to be gentle and loving and nurturing. I want you to notice messages that come up and do some work on that, either with a therapist or by yourself, in releasing internally. And I think you'll get there. Some other things to notice, you might want to just do a couple of awareness sessions where you just notice as you go through your arousal journey, what's going on with your body posture, what's going on with your breathing, what's going on with your thinking, the things that are holding you back. Breathe more, breathe deeper, breathe into the areas that feel numb or tight. Moving, especially those pelvic floor muscles, and hip rocking, shaking, all those kinds of movements are going to get energy flowing. And sound. Sound would be the other thing I'd really encourage you to work with. And I think that using all of those tools, it's going to help you find your path to orgasm, and then the more you practice that, the easier it will get. So I hope that that is helpful for you. Let's see. Another question from Steve. I had a girlfriend before with whom I could consistently achieve vaginal G-spot orgasm with my fingers, and 60 to 70% of the time during intercourse. My current girlfriend has orgasms this way very infrequently. I can really only give her consistent orgasm via oral sex, or OM. Oming is an orgasmic meditation practice. In this case, probably referring to a very specific type of orgasmic meditation practice. Any advice? Excellent question, Steve. So first of all, your current partner is in the majority of women. Most women do not have orgasms from vaginal penetration with fingers or penises, and intercourse doesn't bring most women to orgasm. So that's just, for starters, just so you get that perspective that vaginal penetration with a penis is not necessarily the best way for a lot of women to get to orgasm. Also, though, that for a lot of women, these are learned skills. So right now you have a partner who consistently can have orgasms. Yay for that. I want you to just, that's a really good thing, because that's a step in the process that not all women have gotten to yet. So you know there's a way that you can get her orgasms, so that's great. Oral sex and oming is a orgasmic meditation practice that really focuses on stimulation of the head of the clitoris with a very specific kind of technique. So The next thing to think about, first of all, this is assuming that your partner wants to expand her pathways to orgasm, and why not? Because the more ways you can get there, the better, I think. Is that you want to go through a process of what I call cross-training. And cross-training means that you do what works, you use your easy path, your established path, and you add something else. So for example, while you're stimulating the head of her clitoris with your finger, you could also, assuming she's at high level arousal and full engorgement, okay, assuming those things, high level arousal, full engorgement, you're stimulating with your fingers or your tongue, the way you know that gets her there, and at the same time, you might have fingers inside or a toy inside that's giving her that feeling of penetration. And so she starts connecting those two things. Pleasuring her, what people call the G-spot, which is the bottom of the urethral sponge, or the erectile tissue in the floor is also good to play with. So that you're playing with two things at once, and that's what I call cross-training. You're doing what you already know gets you there, and then you're adding another kind of stimulation. And the brain kind of starts going like, oh, these things happen at the same time, and then they start thinking it's the same thing. Ideally, she's also playing with breathing more, breathing deeper, exploring different ways to enhance with breath, sound, using her own pelvic floor muscles. So if she's doing all those things and you're helping her with this cross-training, she's probably going to start developing that pathway of internal stimulation, getting her more turned on. So it's a learning project. I think you can have a lot of fun with it. Just be very cautious about making it feel pressured, because, you know, anxiety and performance pressure are just the last thing that help any of us, male, female, or anybody in between or both. Performance anxiety is just the antidote to arousal. So have it be a fun, playful exploration, but without any pressure to get anywhere. But learning how to have orgasms with penetration, from intercourse, and really from any kind of stimulation is all stuff anyone can learn anytime they want. So if your partner's up for the playing of the game, you can have a lot of fun with that. This is a great next question. Heather asks, have you ever heard of a person having an orgasm by just nipple stimulation? Well, I'm going to tell you a story. You got to share a story. Here it goes. So I myself learned to have orgasms as a teenager by myself. It was pretty irregular with partners because they were mostly teenagers too. Nobody knew what they were doing. So I had a whole learning process with orgasm already. But the first thing I consciously set out to learn was this. And so I had reconnected with my old high school boyfriend, and we were conversing about lovers we'd had in the years in between. And he told me, he said, I was with this woman who could have orgasms from nipple stimulation. And I went, wow, that's really interesting, kind of cool. Really awesome, actually. Wait a minute. I wonder if I could learn to do that. And I still remember that whole process because I sort of set out on a little training program. Now, I didn't have me to guide me, so I was just kind of winging it. But that's what I kind of did, that cross-training that we're talking about. So that while I was self-pleasuring or with a partner, and a partner was pleasuring me, I would do nipple stimulation, areola in particular, because I used to be a midwife and a nurse practitioner and doula, and worked a lot with mamas and babies. And one of the hardwiring pathways that exist in the body is from the nipples and the areola, really, to the uterus and the genitals and to the brain, because after women have babies, they breastfeed, and then helps the uterus contracts so they don't bleed to death. It's all a really good plan that Mother Nature evolved. So I knew there's this hardwired connection, so it kind of made sense to me. So playing with the nipples, but particularly that kind of areolar stimulation that would be a baby suckling, that kind of firm, rhythmic squeezing and releasing. And so I did that along with doing all the other things that got me turned on and orgasmic. And then you stop doing the other thing, but you keep doing the nipple stimulation. You just kind of notice your arousal level, and if it sort of drops off, then you go back to using your hand or your vibrator or your partner's whatever. And over time, you start to train your mind body, and it got to a certain point where I indeed could have orgasms just from nipple stimulation. So I put that in the category of learnable, absolutely learnable things if you want to learn it. Now, there's always those people who are just sort of naturals and they just kind of get it, right? But we can use those as models and then learn what they figured out how to do naturally. Okay. All right. Let's see. How much should the level of pleasure for a woman decline due to atrophy of the vulva? For example, labia minora. What is your view of the use of the Fiera device that increases engorgement? How often best to use the Fiera? Well, Brian, I don't actually know what the Fiera is, so you're going to have to tell me what that is. If it's a pump, if it's a pussy pump, then those can be really useful. I don't know if it is or not, so Brian, get back to me and let me know about that. But about the level of pleasure declining due to atrophy. So I'm assuming you're meaning a woman who's postmenopausal. There can be other reasons for atrophy, for other kinds of disease conditions, but usually we're talking about postmenopausal vulvas and vaginas. And I don't even like the word atrophy. That just doesn't really sound good. So I think of it as it gets more fragile, it gets drier, just the same way, your skin changes, and I think that's a much more gentler mindset to have than the word atrophy. But the level of pleasure doesn't have to change. It might be that we need to learn to use more of our mind body. It might be that we need to learn how to turn ourselves on using other skills or techniques, or maybe our pleasure comes from different kinds of erotic stimulation than we used to get off on. But we could look at that as an opportunity to explore ways to get more turned on. Okay, so a Noel Fiera arouser is specifically designed to stimulate blood flow in the clitoris and encourage vaginal lubrication, helping awaken the body for intimate and enjoyable sexual experience. That still doesn't actually tell me what it is, so I still don't actually know. But I'm assuming it's probably some sort of pump. What I would call a pussy pump. I don't know if it is or not, but a pussy pump, which is sort of a device that's, it's kind of like a domed device that goes over the vulva or part of the vulva with a pump that you can pump up, is actually a great way of, for a lot of women, of bringing more blood flow and more engorgement. So it can be fun. You can get ones that vibrate. And so that can be a toy that you can add to your repertoire and see if you like it. At the same time, we can do a lot of those things ourselves just with stimulation, using our own inner tools and our partner's tools. All right. Let's see what else we have. E says, I've heard that the vagina is use it or lose it organ. What does this mean, and what can a woman do about this if she doesn't have a partner? Well, it's a really good question. So use it or lose it means that, and this goes for any part of our body, that if you want to keep it as healthy as you can and as functional as you can, you want to use it. It's the same reason why we want to get exercise and use our muscles. So the thing with the vagina is and the vulva is the more often we get aroused, the more blood flow we're going to have, and the healthier and juicier the tissue will stay as we get older. So I think in general, the more we circulate our erotic energy, the more we get turned on and circulate that energy and play with it, the less challenges we'll have around libido. For anyone who's having libido issues at any time in their lives, particularly for women, go ahead and get yourself turned on. Whether you're horny or not, let the turn on get going, and that will create the desire. So rather than the desire leading to arousal, let arousal lead to desire. So I think that's an important component. So keeping our genitals healthy through our lifespan involves getting aroused, getting turned on. Now, that does not necessarily mean having sex with a partner, and it doesn't necessarily mean having intercourse. However, vaginas, if we don't get turned on and we don't have any kind of penetration, they do tend to tighten up over the years. So I think it's a wonderful thing to incorporate in our play, in our solo play, is some sort of toy that we insert. It doesn't have to be big, by the way, but something inside, so that we're staying kind of open, both figuratively and literally, to those sensations, giving the muscles the right kind of message, and keeping them, helping them be loose and flexible. That's what we really want. We want our muscles to be relaxed. At the same time, we want them to be toned, right? So we don't want them too tense. We don't want them too loose and not able to do anything. So I do think that in your solo play, you might want to incorporate something like a jade egg or a dildo, or if you like the sensation of a vibrator inside, in your play, along with all the other kinds of stimulation you're doing to the more external parts. And keep those internal parts connected neurologically, right? We want to keep those pathways, just like I was talking about developing those pathways by cross training. We want to keep using all of those pathways. Okay, let's see what else. Okay. Anastasia says, I'm researching my pleasure, yay, and got pretty good on my own. I had problems with orgasm, and now I'm much better. And I'll just note that that's usually the case for most women, that our solo play is where we learn to be orgasmic and get better at it. Yet, she says, it's more difficult for me to keep connection and communicate with a partner. Yeah, no kidding. Because there's a whole other person there. They got all their stuff going on. I have to say, I have to stay mostly in my head, imagining something, and touching my clit myself in order to orgasm. We start to communicate, or he starts to touch my clit, or he takes the control of frictions. I kind of lose the connection and lose my arousal. I would love to stay aroused and in connection with my partner rather than be solo connected to my own fantasies and feelings during partner sex. Well, again, a very great question. So think of the levels of learning around our arousal and orgasm journey. So level 1 is I have to learn how to get into my arousal by myself and go on that journey to get to orgasm. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is, can I do that with another person present? So I'm still sort of in my solo arousal, and arousal is a trance state. So I'm in my solo trance, and there's another person there, and can I still get to where I want to go? And then sort of the third level is, can I do it with a partner, with the partner helping and supporting and doing some of the turning on? And then like the next level after that would be, can I really like surrender control of my nervous system and let another person take me on that journey? And these are all sort of levels of learning. So looking at it that way, I think, is useful. So knowing where you are in that learning journey is great. So there's a whole bunch of things we have to do with a partner that we just don't have to do when we're by ourselves. Think of it like playing an instrument. So if you're playing a guitar and you're all by yourself, you can just noodle around and doodle and play and just go wherever you want to go with the music. But if you're playing a duet, it's a whole other experience. You're trying to make the music connect, and you're trying to pay attention to your partner and what do they want and what's going on with their instrument, and your thinking gets going. Are they bored? Are they having fun? Am I spending too much time and attention on my own self? Should I be paying attention to them? They're having all those same conversations. So there's so much more going on with a partner. So it's really understandable why it's not so easy. But think of it as a process. If you have a partner that you're connected to and that you're with over time, then you've got this, you're going to go on a learning journey together. And so you might want to try little steps on that learning journey and sort of separating some of the things out. Like one of the things that's really tricky with when we partner with people who have a different kind of plumbing than we do is that they don't necessarily know how to pleasure a vulva if they are a penis owner. So they have to learn. They don't have any instructions implanted inside their skull. So there's this whole teaching component that needs to go on, but the teaching part isn't usually really sexy, right? We can't be in our arousal trance at the same time we're giving instructions. So I think with the same way if you're playing an instrument with somebody, there's going to be times when you're just jamming, right? And that's the kind of classic sexual encounter we have that's just, it's a jam session, and we go where it goes. But if you are playing music with someone, sometimes you're going to rehearse specific things, and you're going to break it down, and you're going to stop, and you're going to discuss, and you're going to say, how did that work, and what would work better. So I think it's useful to also have what I call playpens. And a playpen is a time that you set up just for learning, and you want to break it down to just sort of learning one bit or one thing, and you want to make it fun, right? Fun, creative, but really be about feedback and communication. So, for example, a good example is you want to teach your partner how you like your genitals to be touched. You could break this down. This could be many, many sessions, but it might start with a session where your partner watches you self-pleasure, which is a pretty radical concept, right? Because we still have a lot of shame about self-pleasure, but you might have a session where your partner just watches and notices what you do. And then the next session might be more of a show and tell, where you show and then you explain. And maybe the next one is show and tell and return demo, where you do something to yourself and then your partner does that to you. Just maybe one move at a time. You can also have separate sessions or incorporate sessions where you practice feedback, where you practice giving communication that's useful, right? Because it's not useful to just go like, yeah, that's good. At the same time, when we're in arousal trance, that might be all we can say. So have a session where you practice feedback. And you come up with language that you know what it means, your partner knows what it means, and signals. So there's this whole learning curriculum that you can do together to help your partner learn more about what pleases you. At the same time, there's some learning that you're going to work on doing, which is about how to share these things with your partner. And then I think sort of the last piece is, what else can you do to really get connected with your partner? So it's not just about particular erotic activities. So it might be that before you even start playing, you sit and you do some erotic breathing together and eye gazing, or your eyes are closed and you're heart to heart, or you have your hands on each other's hearts and maybe another hand on each other's genitals, and you just breathe and visualize energy running back and forth. I mean, there's all sorts of fun ways to do this, but it's about creating more of a connection energy between you and your partner so that you'll feel more comfortable and trusting and able to go into the pleasure. So that was a lot. I hope that's helpful. E asks, are there any resources we can give our male partners to let them know how important cunnilingus is to many women? And what resources can we give our male partners to help them learn how to go down on a woman? Well, first of all, you're going to be the best resource for helping them learn how to go down on you. So I think that if you've got the right partner and you approach it the right way, it's going to be a fun, exciting learning opportunity. Because if somebody really wants to please you, they want to know what you want. They want to know what you like, and they want to know what turns you on. For any guys who are listening, if you don't know, oral sex is usually one of the best ways to help women really get turned on and have orgasms. So if you don't love it now, I recommend that you learn to love it the same way anyone can learn to love giving oral sex to any version of genitalia. So learning to love giving oral sex, whatever the plumbing of your partner might be, is an awesome skill set. So start with that. There are a number of books. I'm not sure if I want to go into sort of specifics right now, but there's some really good books if you've got the kind of guy who reads books, and there's some really good videos, not standard porn because that won't teach them anything useful, but some erotic learning videos. Let's see, what can I do for you to post that, because I'm not going to get them out of my head at this moment. Well, if you're in any of my courses, you're going to get all of those resources. But see if I can post a blog sometime in the next week or so with some of my favorite resources. But like I said, really the best resource is going to be you. All right. What else? Okay. Here we go. Oh, missed that one. Kelly says, I have the opposite quandary. I'm multi-orgasmic with a partner, yet I cannot find enough arousal to have an orgasm during solo exploration. Well, see, we all learn differently. We all have different learning journeys, Kelly, so that makes sense. In fact, I get bored really quickly. I understand I need to make a regular practice out of it. Like what you said, let the arousal create turn on. Well, you know, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One might be something like reading erotica, you know, reading short erotic stories. You might find help with your turn on. Seeing if, you know, where you can go in your fantasies. Our fantasy is a wonderful thing. Our imagination is, you know, our brain believes it's all true. Fantasy is a great way to get really turned on. And you might even want to explore that boredom thing. You know, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's some resistance or blockage. You know, what comes up for you other than the feeling that you're getting bored? Do you feel like it's a waste of time, or it's indulgent, or you don't deserve it? You know, all kinds of different messages we can have. So I would suggest exploring that. So fantasy, imagination, erotica, and just really noticing what comes up. You know, the thing about pleasure is if it's just another thing on your to-do list that you have to check off, we're not really going for the pleasure. So I want to encourage you to explore what really pleasures you and find out, you know, where you can take yourself, because it can be really awesome. And the better you get at that, the more fun you're going to have with partners. Well, it sounds like you're having a lot of fun already, but I think there's always more to be had. Barry says, what does pubic hair do? Is it okay to shave? What does the labia minora do? So, pubic hair. All right, so I'm of the generation where all women had pubic hair, and I'm a mammal, and I like fur. So that's my personal prejudice. The actual function of pubic hair is that it's actually there. So our oldest sex signals were scent. The smell of a female in heat is a huge turn on, and the skin on the mons has extra scent glands. And so one of the functions of the pubic hair is actually to hold on to that scent, so that musky, attractive, yummy pussy smell. Other than that, it's just hair, so it doesn't really have a function. So if people want to shave, go for it. If people don't want to shave, go for it. What I don't like is the sort of fascist kind of, you have to shave or you have to be, you have to look a certain way. So I'm kind of like, look however you want to look, have hair, don't have hair, have some hair, whatever you want, but do what really makes you happy. and I don't think anyone should ever be pressuring anybody to shave or not shave. So that being said, I've also seen a lot of women who shave who have issues with shaving bumps and irritation and that sort of thing. So if that's the issue, then I would encourage you not to shave. The labia minora are the inner lips, and they're the delicate, hairless, mucous membrane structures that are inside, and they get pleasure. They're sensitive. They have some erectile capillaries in them, so depending on how much, they get variously engorged, and they're also part of the evolutionary genital, co-evolutionary genital process, right? So they're sort of there, designed by, Mother Nature's all about reproduction. So they're kind of designed to kind of snuggle around a penis, and that's what they're there for. By the way, and they come in so many shapes and sizes, and they're all normal. Okay. Steve says, cunnilingus. I have found a slow, methodical, 1 o'clock consistent stroke akin to ohm or welcome method creates intense clitoral orgasm. Well, I think that there's lots and lots and lots of ways to stroke the head of the clitoris. That's one that does tend to work for lots of women. I don't know if I buy the whole, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, like if the head of the clitoris was a clock. I think all women might have sweet spots on the head of the clitoris, but I think it can vary. Somebody tells you it's at 1 o'clock, you'll probably think it's at 1 o'clock position. But I do think that finding the right stroke for the head of the clitoris that you're playing with is the key. So yeah, that's a stroke that works for a lot of women, but it might work at a certain time of arousal. One of the things about arousal is the more turned on we are, the higher our pleasure and the less our pain. So a stroke like that, when a woman is not very aroused, it might actually be irritating, and at high level arousal, it might be awesome. So you really need to just check in with the clitoris owner about what they like and when. I also find that a very fast, very light, if this was the clitoral head, a very, very almost vibratory, I don't know if I can see that on the vibratory stroke can be really nice as well. And the thing about speed, slow, fast, light, or more firm, is again, it will vary from woman to woman. It will vary in the same woman from day to day. It will vary in the same woman from early arousal to mid-level to high-level arousal. Sometimes something that feels great as we get near an orgasm, or even more likely just during or after an orgasm, can be way too much. So this is definitely a check-in. Okay. Brian says, have you ever heard of a woman who comes only when the top part of her body is free to move? In other words, not when she is on her back. Well, movement is very important, and particularly that undulation of the spine and the rocking of the hips. So for somebody who that's a really important part of their arousal pattern, they're going to do better when they're in a position where they can freely move. But for all women, probably men too, actually, because it's really part of the most basic sort of sexual reflex, hip rocking, that little pelvic rock that we do, is really a big piece of the turn on in the arousal. And then letting that ripple up the spine is super useful in moving the energy around. The other thing, though, about women on top is that is the position for most of us that we're most likely to be orgasmic with during penetrative intercourse. And part of the reason for that is we have that freedom of movement, and we also are the one in control of the speed and the depth and the angle, all of those things, which are important to tune into to, find our way. But also in that position, the whole female erectile network, right? You've got this whole network of structures. That whole network is in contact with our partner's body. And so one of the things that women do when we're on top is we don't usually jump up and down on the penis. We don't kind of go up and down. Usually what we do on top is we sort of stay on it and rock and roll and pivot our hips. And that means that whole erectile network is in contact and getting stimulated. And that usually works better. So you might want to, there's always more experiments to run, Brian, so you might want to also notice what would happen if you're in a position where you're on top, but instead of doing sort of in and out thrusting, you do more kind of rolling, grinding, and pivoting and hip rocking kind of motions. And also, your partner might find that a pillow or a wedge or a ramp or something under her hips also changes that. So just more things to explore and experiment and play with. Okay. Okay. Somebody would like me to address the science of thinking off. So thinking off is hands off, no genital stimulation, really any body part stimulation, orgasm. And some women naturally have this ability, but anyone can learn to have it. And it usually involves breathing, making sound, and rocking your hips. Although we've got some women who've done it in an MRI machine where they couldn't move their body at all, but also using their pelvic floor muscles. So that and your imagination are enough to get you into an arousal and orgasmic state. And again, this is a learnable skill. It has now been documented because a lot of people are kind of like, yeah, right, sure, that woman's just faking it. And of course, nobody ever knows if women are faking it or not, unless you put them in an MRI machine, and then you can see what's going on in their brain. You can actually document that, yes, indeed, they had an orgasm lying there with no external stimulation. So that's all in the mind, the breath, sound, and internal movement. All right. See what else. All right, so this is just sort of more about that. Claims of some experts about ability to trigger no-touch orgasms, mental being anchoring to voice, orgasm over time, or erotic hypnosis. Well, that's another way of doing what I was talking about doing, where instead of you being a woman being the agent of her own thinking off, you can play with a partner and you can get voice cues that get you where you want to go. So again, this is kind of, it's like operant conditioning, the basic Pavlov's dog, where you feed the dog and you ring a bell at the same time. You do it over and over again, and then one day you ring the bell without feeding the dog, and the dog salivates. You can do the same thing with orgasms. So it's kind of orgasmic Pavlovian training, and that trigger can be words that our partner says. The trigger can be thoughts, and again, it's all learnable stuff that if we think it's fun and we want to put some time and energy into it, anyone can learn, just like anyone can learn how to play an instrument. Okay, so let's see what else. Okay, let's see if I've missed any questions. So we're coming into the end of our broadcast, so I just want to have a few more minutes. If you have any questions, now is the time. Let me see if I've missed any. Okay, somebody says, tell me about the U spot. Okay, so first of all, this whole kind of thing of naming spots, this spot and that spot and the other spot, I don't know that I find that really useful because my background is really more in anatomy and what are the structures and what's actually there. And so what women have is, like I said, a network of erectile tissue. That network of erectile tissue has different components. One of the components is called the urethral sponge. And the urethral sponge is a tube of erectile tissue that surrounds the tube of the urethra. Right? That's the pee tube. So it goes from the bladder out the pee hole, basically. And the erectile tissue it's like a roll of paper towels. So the cardboard roll in the center of the paper towels is like the urethra, and the erectile tissue is like the paper towels. And when it's not engorged, it's like you're at the end of the roll of paper towels. And when it's really engorged, it's like you've got this brand new jumbo roll of paper towels. Now, the more common place to think about accessing this is putting fingers inside the vagina and going up, right? Because it's right above the roof of the vagina, so you can access it by playing this way. But remember, it's a tube of erectile tissue, and so another place you can access it is around the urethral opening. And so that's what people are calling the U spot. Now, for some women, that's a spot that can get irritated, particularly if she's not engorged enough. So if you play with the area around the urethral opening when your partner is not engorged, it will be irritating. She probably won't like it. But when she's nicely aroused and engorged, that's a place that you can access and play with the urethral sponge from the outside of the vulva as opposed to through vaginal penetration. But it's not really a spot all on its own. Okay, let's see if I've missed anything else. Brian says, is the level of arousal and pleasure from making out the same level as intercourse? Well, it depends when you have intercourse, Brian. The fact of the matter is arousal level is independent of the activities that stimulate it. So arousal is its own thing. The things we do to get there are their own things. And that's going to vary, again, from person to person. So for most women, most of the time, it takes us a certain amount of time, I'm going to say 30 to 45 minutes, to get to the point where something like penetrative intercourse would feel good. So if we are making out and getting really aroused by all kinds of other sensual and erotic play, that's an awesome thing. I don't even like to use the word foreplay. I prefer to think of it as warm-up. But hopefully most women are starting to learn how to really know where they are in their arousal, and that we're not having intercourse when we're not actually aroused enough for it to feel awesome, which is not how most of us start out. Most of us start out, we partner with men having intercourse because our partner has a hard-on and we think that's what we're supposed to do. And on average, couples in this country, heterosexual couples, the entire erotic experience from beginning to end only lasts like 10 minutes. So as you can see, for most women, that's not nearly enough time for them to be really deeply in their arousal journey. So again, I think we want to separate out the activities from the arousal level. But when we get really tuned into our arousal level and we wait, as women, if we wait till we're at that high level, deep, thorough arousal, if the entire erectile network is really, really engorged and have intercourse at that point, it's going to feel pretty awesome. But if we have intercourse when we're earlier or even the middle part of that journey, it's probably not going to feel so awesome. Let's see, more questions? During penetration, I feel the entry, then it's like the inserted is going through a narrow bit, the one squeezed through it is all the way in. Is this normal? Well, Lucy, a couple things. If you are really at high level arousal and your whole erectile network is really engorged, it forms like a snug but stretchy cuff. So feeling something penetrate through the snug, stretchy cuff has its own distinct sensation. If you're allowing penetration before you're at that high level arousal, it can just feel tight and unpleasant. So that's a distinction that you need to make, is that when it feels like it's going through that kind of tighter place because it feels really good and it's engorged and stretchy, or is it feeling like this isn't really quite ready to dilate and open and receive yet? So that's what I would suggest you really tune into. And then the other piece of this might be that in your solo play, do some exploration with your fingers. We're all different structurally. You might have a part of your vagina that's a narrower part, and that's just how your vagina is. And so you can explore that yourself by doing some solo exploration when you're not turned on at all. And then get really aroused. Give yourself a nice long, 45 minutes to get really turned on, and put your fingers inside again and see what you feel. So again, it might be that you have a structure where you do have a place that's just kind of narrow. It might be that you're allowing penetration before you're aroused enough to have that engorged, stretchy cuff. Or if it's feeling really awesome, it's probably going through that engorged, stretchy cuff. Okay. Okay, another question from Brian about pleasures. Level of pleasure for kissing, same level as pleasure from an orgasm. Depends on the woman. Some women can have orgasms from kissing, right? So again, we want to separate the stimulation, that would be the kissing or the different kinds of erotic play, from how much pleasure and arousal there is, and that's going to vary. So would you expect the pleasure from orgasm to be greater than kissing? Again, I mean, it really depends. Like I said, some women can have orgasms from making out and kissing. So this is something you just have to kind of check in with your partner about. But for a lot of women, the making out, the kissing, the erotic play that isn't intercourse is often the more arousing. So if that's the case, then it's about learning how can we take that arousal energy and keep it going through the whole spectrum of erotic activities. Okay. So we are getting to the time when we have to stop. I have been having a great time talking with you. I want to remind you all that we do online erotic education. And the classes are similar to this in some ways and different in some. And in the classes, there's a lecture component with lots of images and slides, and we also have some discussion, and we do question and answer as we go. And we also have an online social chat group, a private confidential group, and you have lots of home play assignments and lots of resources like some of the things you asked about tonight. So we're in the middle of our Secrets of Female Pleasure course, which is our February course, but you can still get on board that. And in fact, I'd say get on board. We've got the classes are recorded, so if you missed the weekly live webinar, you can still get the recording of that. Next month, we're doing Women's Anatomy of Arousal, where we go into lots of detail about women's anatomy, and then we're going to play with female ejaculation in April. And again, these classes are for women and anyone who partners for women. So I want to remind you all that we would love to have you come, as it were, come and join us. So this is actually the slide from the last webinar we did, but just basically, if you want to get in on this special deal, it's good through midnight tonight, so I know the date is wrong there, but if you sign up tonight for next month's class, you get a whopping 50% off, and I'd love to have you come join us because the online classes have been awesome fun. So I thank you so much for all your wonderful questions. I know we didn't have time for every question, but we got a lot of them. If you want to ask more, come join me in a webinar. We have a lot of fun in our online classes. So thanks again for joining me. This is Sherry Winston, and I'm wishing you all very, very juicy blessings.